computer. Let me make double sure that this is doing what we think it's doing. Cool. And yeah, take it away, Mark.
All right. Let me share my desktop real quick. Can you guys see my desktop?
Yep.
All right. How do I minimize this? All right. Here we go. So the question was if we could go over Express middleware in a little bit more detail. So I created this amazing app for you guys. I can share the GitHub link later. So let's just go over what it looks like first. We got the server. And so just to show you guys how it works, I've got a post route here. And then if you notice the app.use express.json here, I got another post route here. And then I have a bunch of static routes, or static middleware, I should say. One is pointing to the distribution folder. Someone was telling me why I didn't put it in the public folder in the homework, and one of the reasons is because usually I'll actually ignore this folder because I don't want it to be on GitHub because it could be large and unwieldy sometimes. So that's why I separate them. I don't want it to be in the public folder for that reason. Let's see. So I got a public folder, and then I have images of puppies and kittens. And if you notice, this guy and this guy, they don't have like routes attached to them, because if you don't have anything here like a string, app.use will just default as like dash. So you don't need to have it there. This one right here though would be, for example, going to the puppy images route. You can kind of think of it as like almost like a route that the browser has access to. So if we go, where did I start it? Yep. To the browser. Can you guys see my browser? Yeah? No?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. So if I go here and I do like slash main.js, you can like actually see your code because Express is serving it to the browser. It's almost like you're doing a GET request to get this file. And then I could have like the puppy images, and it'll serve like a picture, right? Because I said this is my route, and then the files that are available in that route I can access from here. But I could also do like, so if you look at the code again, I have this public folder, and that is now in the slash route. So I could say, for example, slash. So imagine that's the public folder, and I could go to image, puppy, puppies, and then one.jpg, and it would give me the same file. Okay, because this one is going to go through the slash folder, which has the public folder in it, and then it also has the image folders inside of the public folder, so I could still serve it that way. So this is kind of like a shortcut, so I don't have to go through all the folders to get to this one folder that I want. And then if you look at the app, you can serve that, or you can use that route basically, or the one that I created with app.use. Either way, you can use that slash route, basically like an absolute path, to serve whatever you need. So in my images, where is it? Yeah, so my images folder, or my images component, I'm going to pass it a source, the source. That's where like the link to my images are. And then in here, I'm gonna have like the actual file name. So if I go to here and I click on puppies, I can get all the images. Kittens, I can get all the images. Oh, I forgot to show you this, no parsing and yes parsing. So if I go back to here, you'll see that there's an undefined and there's a message hello. So what happened here is in my server, those were two post routes. So if I go to the buttons, this is the no parsing. It sends a post request to no parsing, no JSON parsing with a message of hello. And the other one, yes parsing, sends a post request to yes parsing with a message of hello. So what happens is in server.js, because express.json is loaded after the no parsing route, this post request, the JSON, the body in it does not get parsed. So that's why we have nothing here, undefined. Whereas this one, which comes after express.json, does get parsed. So now we can see the rect.body. And then as a bonus, doing this button. So this button throws an error. And what's nice about it is if you go here into your console, you can see exactly where the error came from now. So this is coming from app.jsx line 30. Yep, it's right there, line 30. So what we did is in the Webpack config, we add a file called whatever your bundle file is called, .map. And then here in DevTool, we add a flag called source map. And what that does is basically that one giant file that gets created by Webpack now gets pointers to what parts of or where in the code of your original code that's coming from. So this giant file now has sort of a map to get the source of the error with more detail. All right, so that's pretty much all I have to say. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Sorry, that source map.map file, did you have to make that yourself? Is it like a config file or does it get generated?
Oh yeah, it just gets generated. You just give it a name and it'll generate it automatically.
So Johnson and Sissy, both like you guys both were wanting to hear something about this middleware question. I was curious to know if this really this answered your question, or if you have more questions.
It answered my question.
Sorry?
Yeah, it answered my question.
Okay.
I get it better now.
Cool.
Yeah, I think so.
I think whenever I hear I think so, I think I don't think so. Do you I think of middleware as just kind of like going from place to place. It's like you can picture all these like requests coming in through your server. The requests kind of come in, and a middleware kind of takes a hold of that request, and it processes information in that request, and it sends it along to the next routes. It's kind of like a middleman in between the original request and whatever's actually going to handle that request. So we use middleware to like process information a little bit so that our program below or the next request that we have can more effectively use that information. So when Mark was using like the express.json, right? What it did is it took the request that was coming in and it populated an object called rect.body with all the information that might have been kind of along with the request. So in that way, the middleware took the request and composed this object for us to use in the rest of our routes. And as soon as it was done processing that information, it just let the request go. Like it was just kind of passing through town and picking up some rect.body.
So actually use doesn't really like execute anything, right? Like you just need to use either post, put, or get to actually do something about the things that passing, right?
So what it does is it does whatever that function is doing, the logic, but then it just says next and then sends it off to the route that it's going to.
Okay.
It's like just another stop, like a bus. It's just going to stop to your destination before you hit your destination.
So why do we need this middleware then? Why not just do, either or?
Because remember, when you send a request, it's like this giant string. It doesn't make any sense to us if we just try to like look at it. But there is like certain tags in there that the computer can parse for us and turn into JavaScript objects. I mean, you can't send JavaScript objects through the wire. It's not going to work, right? You have to do what's called like serializing, or like turning it into data that can be sent through the wire. Then the server gets it, and then the middleware says, oh, this part right here could be turned into a JavaScript object. Let's do that, and then send it down to our whatever route that needs to handle it.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Quick question. Building off of Alex's, if we just add that line to the Webpack config and then run Webpack, it will create the map file for us?
Yes. So there's two things you have to do. You have to add the DevTool flag with source map, and then you have to give a source map file. So if you just look up like Webpack source map config, you can find what you need, or I can share this GitHub with you. You can look at it.
Okay, thank you very much.
And it'll also default that name. You don't need the name isn't required, but the source map, once you put that in, it'll automatically make a name for you. But it can be useful to name it what you want, so you know it's being built.
Thank you.
Sissy, are you cool on the? Are you understanding the middleware?
Yeah.
Cool. Great. So. So Jake, your question about the best way to create a day, week, month, year data structure is decidedly not going to be answered. That's the challenge. So I can refer you to some like front end libraries that make working with time things easier, like Moment.js is one. There's other libraries that do deal with time. Because it's pretty annoying to deal with timestamps, time dates, conversions, blah, blah, blah. Like getting information from them is kind of annoying. But I will say that, using something like Moment or Moment-like could be in your interest for sure. Yeah, and the internet is your helper here. I feel like some people have probably made products similar to this. But that won't be. It'll be helpful, but not too helpful, I'm sure.
Well, but it can be too helpful.
Right.
Is it so?
I mean, I think that you still have to connect the pipes of all this stuff, especially once we connect Redux pipes, it can be a little tricky to keep everything straight. But yeah, so I was going to address that question with a non-answer.
Well, then a follow-up on the internet being helpful. How helpful should we let the internet be?
It's a great question.
If you were to say Google React create calendar.
Right. I mean, I think I would take some time to think about like how your database is going to look, and think about edge cases like how big do you want your calendar to be? How many dates does it have? Like what happens when there's multiple events on the same day or even at the same time? Can that even happen? Like can you have multiple events at the same time on the same day, or is that going to break things? Or any other edge cases? Those are just off the top of my head right now, but I would think about that bit and see how you can use that relational database. Like how many tables do you need? Do you need one table? Do you need two tables? And realize that you probably have to burn it down a couple times. It's like you'll do something and then you'll probably need to change it. I mean, that's as far as the database goes. As far as like the strategy about displaying the calendar, I would definitely start easy. Like I would just display a grid, and figure out look at calendars, just look at them Like I looked at some calendars. This is a new problem for us as well to see, actually, this one, and it's been interesting to kind of think through it. And even just like the shape of the grid of the calendar is pretty standardized. Not like, I just mean like how many squares there are, like, stuff like that. But I don't know. I'm trying to be super nebulous about it because I don't know how much more, number one, I've thought about it. Number two, how much to give you and how to inform your research about how to get it done.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking though is like, the internet has the solution to the question I asked, and like I found it on the internet.
Okay.
It's on the first page of the Google results if you search, and how much to use that. It doesn't have the answer for the database aspect and anything with CRUD, but in terms of displaying a calendar that looks like vaguely like Elliot's, it's there. It's the first page of Google results.
If you're talking about a Medium article that shows up when you Google it, like this is definitely not, like, in my opinion, the most effective way to do it.
Oh, I agree, but just that it's there is my question, sort of. Like, how much should we use that versus our own thinking?
How much?
I guess it's really up to, like, this is like the honor system, obviously. So up to how much you really want to cut your teeth on this project and how much you want to get out of it.
Cool.
All right. So Alex's question, which is a kind of a bit of a rattlesnake. I've been watching Toy Story, getting ready to meet my nephews across the country. So rattlesnakes are dangerous to me. So it's like, what are the best ways to combine Redux actions with asynchronous functions or promises? So as to this point, like, we haven't discussed some specific tools that are available in Redux that kind of require a little more setup. For right now, a very specific answer is that we want to keep all of our reducers being pure functions, meaning that we don't want anything asynchronous happening in our reducer functions. So right now, and I'll have some code to go through about this, but just to talk about it on a high level, we'll want to be keeping asynchronous things both inside actions or inside React components at this time. We'll soon be able to kind of move those out and kind of have our React components not understand that they're asynchronous. They just get information and that's it. And our reducer is also unaware of any asynchronicity. It's just running functions whenever it's dispatched. So I will talk about the way to do that asynchronous stuff is through using some middleware, and there's other tools that are going to be helpful, more specifically helpful for this project, that also use a middleware for Redux. And so I was going to set up the Redux logger, which could be really useful. And in doing so, those of you who feel comfortable doing checking out Redux thunks is what I'm talking about. Feel free to kind of apply those things, but it's certainly not a requirement for this project. And because especially if you're unfamiliar with Redux and its functional nature, it can be a little annoying, I think, to get a hold of. And there's a lot of code running around, a lot of boilerplate to just do one thing. So just want to make clear that kind of making this middleware and making it happen is not a requirement, or doing asynchronicity things through thunks is not a requirement at all. But I need to delete some things. Talk amongst yourselves. If you have more questions, put them in the Slack. Let's see. Make sure we're looking good here. And maybe I'll just make reducer too. Why not? Okay. Cool. Make sure we're running okay. Cool. Thanks for your patience. And maybe I'll share here. Okay. Does everyone see my screen? Got thumbs or head bangs. Okay, cool.
Looks good.
I had some other I had some middleware set up, Mark, before you said you were going to do it. I got it. Great. So let's take a little quick tour around this little app we've got going on here. Let's look at our server real quick. We have our Express server. We're listening on, we have port 3000. We're importing some things. Looks like we're importing some database things, DB and a fellow. We're static serving out of the public folder. So we have a GET request, and we are in it. Some of my debugs. Looks like we're sending a file for everything that comes in, serving an index.html file, seeding some database things, hitting import for our listen. And I guess what I've made is kind of like this little app that kind of looks like this. And
Also, I just have a quick question. So what does express.static do?
Sure. Express.static. This is kind of like, what Mark was kind of talking about a bit about middleware, and that express.static, this app.use, we have these, we have different verbs, right? We have get, post, put, delete, patch, other kind of things. But app.use matches all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that every request that comes through, and you can picture requests kind of going from top to bottom of this page. And so every get, put, post, and delete is going to kind of go through this file first. Go through this middleware first. And express.static says, what we want to do is give the opportunity for this request to go look in this folder at this location, and dir name is going to be like wherever this file is. And so where are we? This index.js server. It's like wherever we are is dir name. So it's like this is going to be wherever I am in my computer to get to this project, and then /server is kind of is what dir name is. So dir name kind of represents /server right now.
Console log.
Hmm?
Just console log it.
Sure.
Yeah, I got it.
Cool, great. So then we go up to our public folder, and anything in here will be served to the front end. If we have for example, let's just put something in here, maybe a hello.txt here, and let's just say hello. So now that our server is effectively kind of serving static assets out of this public folder at this location, whenever we actually go to, I know this is not going to work right now because of the way I've set up, but it's going to look through, we don't have a route for a hello, whatever this is, get hello.txt. We don't have a route for that. But instead, this express static says, well, if we're given something at this route, we're going to go through and look in our public directory first. And if there's something that matches that, like hello.txt does, I'm just going to give you that thing. I'm not going to go through the rest of my app, right? So if we were to just go, we can still get access to, this is a React app that I have right now. But, we have access to, and Mark did this earlier, right? I think mine's called main.js. Hopefully it is not. I called mine bundle.js. So we're going to see this whole, the whole mess that Webpack made, and what our browser is effectively kind of using to make our React app. And that's because it lives in this folder that's called public.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that's working. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
So what are we talking about? We're talking about async things. So this is just like we have kind of a counter situation going on, and we have a counter that's going up and down, and we also somehow get these names that are different depending on what numbers we are showing. One thing I want to show you is that's pretty cool is like React Dev Tools, which I strongly recommend that you all get and put on your Chrome browser. And what Chrome Dev Tools can do for us is it's very similar to our Elements kind of console, where we can kind of look around the DOM and see what's going on, and see like, oh, we have like this bundle.js, that's what we just looked at, it has all of our React app stuff in it, and we can like see what's on the DOM, right? Like the React component, the React Dev Tools does the same thing, but instead of like the DOM, it gives us the React structure that we have. So in this case, it says, oh, you have a component called app, and app is rendering a component called counter. And so if we look back at the code here, maybe we can double screen this here. If we're to look at what our app actually is, we can see that, like, sure enough, we're rendering our app component, and then we have a counter component inside of our app component. So this looks cool. Like, this looks good. This is like the structure of our app. And so not only can we kind of like look around, like we can see what is actually being passed as props. We can see what our state is currently. So I want you to see kind of what happens here when I push up the count up. Like our count goes up here, and we see that the count goes up, and that's what our state is in this component at this moment. We can also see other like everything about the state, right? We have like these names like Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy. That's a big shout out to Scooby-Doo. And we see that once these counts are changing, it looks like we're accessing like this fellow's array on state. If we go up and down, we see these things changing. And the other cool thing we're going to do is we're going to get real fellows as opposed to Scooby-Doo characters. And when we do this, unless I broke things. Oh, I might have broken this. We'll come back to this. I deleted this right before we got on. So bottom line is for the React Dev Tools here, we can see state, we can see past props, we can see new props when they come in. This is really helpful to make sure you know exactly what's happening in your React app. So right now, I've set up this counter to be using Redux state. And I guess instead of kind of showing you the code for this, what I want to do is show you the store. And I want to show you how to set up a Redux logger. Because it's pretty cool, and I'll show you exactly how cool it is. Because you can see all the states and actions, action creators and dispatching actions are how that we modify state in a Redux store. And it's kind of like, setting state in React, and we kind of have that opportunity to see how state changes with these React Dev Tools. And so giving this Redux logger, we can kind of have a better idea of how state is like changing and moving around. So here we have like our store that we're creating, and I have this reducer function for our counting. We have count up and count down. So we need to like the create store actually can take a lot of different parameters here, a lot of different arguments rather. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to kind of use something that comes with Redux called apply middleware, and we'll bring it in at the very top of the file. It's the same as create stores in there as well, and so we can just simply kind of add it to this object, and you can destructure it from the Redux library. So what we're going to do is add apply middleware, and then we have to pass into apply middleware like all the middlewares we want to apply. And so this can be a lot like several things. Like we can put as many things we want in here. We only want to do one thing right now, and that's logger. This is from a separate library from Redux logger, and so we'll need to install this. So I'll npm I Redux logger, and as we wait for that to kind of install, I'm just going to put it in here. And what is it called again? Is it just called logger? Okay. So I'll save that, and I see that we have a rebuild of my Webpack, so I know my front end is buzzing. It's looking good. So now I'm going to take away our Redux. I'm going to go back to our console rather, and get out of our React DevTools. So now, what I had on our counter, these up and down kind of, and what is this? Let's get rid of this. Great. So the buttons that I have for like counting down and counting up, I've hooked them up into our Redux store to dispatch like counting down and counting up. So we know that our Redux store is kind of handling counting up and counting down. In our reducer, we're switching on the action type, and we have a case count up and count down. And can everyone still hear me? I got a strange, someone's trying to sign in on this account. Can someone give me an audio? Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're keeping our state immutable. We're not changing our state, and we're moving our state up and down. And our state.count is either going up or going down depending on our action type. So when we apply this logger and we go back to and we refresh our front end, when we go up or down, we can see this beautiful console log appear, where we can see like, oh wow, it's like we can see exactly what our previous state was before the action that we took. So our count is 0. We dispatched an action that had a type count up, and then we see that our next state is count as 1. And then we say, well, we have another action called count up that happened. And it has a little timestamp, which was our previous state was 1. We said count up, so now our count is 2. And if we were to go back down, we can see that this action is count down, and our action type is count down, and our previous state is count 2, and our next state is count 1. So this really helps us visualize what exactly is going on with each of our dispatched actions. So like to use this, sorry, this group chat's going wild. Okay, and in the same breath, like if you're going to use some Thunk middleware for asynchronous actions, which we're not going to get into right now, you could import thunks from Redux Thunk and then put that middleware. I'll put it before the logger actually, and do something just like that. Again, we're not going to talk about this explicitly for tonight, but that's how I would set up this like applying middleware for dealing with asynchronous actions. However, what we want to kind of tackle right now is like kind of dealing with asynchronicity inside components, kind of without thunks at the moment. So we have we're back in our counter component, which is kind of doing all the work so far. And what we want to do is this Axios, we're going to be getting some fellows that are for real, as opposed to our Scooby-Doo characters. And so I'm going to kind of activate all these things. Like, what do we need to do here? It looks like we're getting fellows here. Handle get fellows. So it's not handle get fellows. Great. And I think we actually need to go to our store and set an action type for getting fellows. So I've kind of done some of this pre-work before we got started. And our initial state has like our initial characters of Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy. And I think what I'd like to do is make a make an action for getting fellows. So if we say get fellows, or let's see, we're going to get fellows here, and that's just going to return an object that has type get fellows, and it has a payload, and let's say fellows are fellows. Yeah, and we probably actually need to pass these in. Okay, so this is going to be our action, just the same way that our count down, count up, like all they have is a type. But when we get fellows, like the implication is that, well, the type is get fellows, and we're going to need to pass some fellows to this function and assign them to like the fellows key of this object. Additionally, we're going to need to kind of set a state or a case for how we're going to handle this in our reducer. So in the same way that we have cases of up and down, we'll have case of get fellows. In this case, you want to return all the state before, and then our fellows is we're just going to replace them. And so we'll say action.fellows. And the reason this is action.fellows is because we have decided in this object we're going to dispatch that all the fellows are going to be called fellows. So it's action.fellows is what we're going to be replacing the fellows in our particular state. Initial state has fellows as well. All right, looks like we have some linting happening. Cool, this looks okay. We're exporting the get fellows. This looks good. I'm gonna go back to counter here. I might even put this to a side just to see, make sure we can kind of see what's going on. So let's see. Lovely. I love all this. So on our back end, we have, I made a route for getting fellows. You can just, I can just tell you right now that this is a get all fellows, and we should be getting back like all the fellows in our database. I don't think I need to go through that particular step, but that's what's going to happen. What's interesting here is like we're going to be using our get fellows function that we just created. That's going to return an action or return a whole an action, right? We has a type and has fellows, and when we're using Axios, remember that we need to dot into the data of the return value to actually get the information we need from that API call. So we're going to dispatch on our store the return value of this function with our passed in fellows. So to kind of go through step by step, we're calling get fellows on this response from our database, which should be a list of all the fellows that we have. And then we're going to get something back in this shape. We're going to have a type of get fellows, and fellows should be an array of all the fellows that we have. And then we're just going to dispatch on our store all that information. And it's going to go down to, oh, well, it has a get fellows type, so we're going to do this. We're going to copy all of our state, but we're going to replace the fellows key with whatever is at actions.fellows. So I think this is all right. I mean, hopefully there's going to be a bug. Bugs are great. Good learning tools. And with Redux, there's almost always a bug before you get started. So let's refresh and let's see if anything's broken. Everything looks good. Our count up is working with our logger. Count down is working. Our names are changing. So let's see what get real fellows gives us. Cool. We notice that we have Mark here instead of whoever that was before, Shaggy. And we had a get fellows action in our logger. And it looks like that, oh wait, where'd it go? I made it small. So get fellows. So it looks like if we look in our previous state, we see our Scooby-Doo characters, but then our action says get fellows. And remember that went to the database to get all the fellows that we've got in our database. And we have new fellows because we replaced them with all the things that we've gotten from our API call to all fellows, right? So our next state is going to be, our count's going to stay the same. This is important. So our count is the same as it is in our previous state, but our fellows have changed. And now when we go up and down, we see different names here as our count goes up and down. So this is kind of like an idea of how we can keep, how we can deal with asynchronous, I guess, actions in our React components, like with the tools available to us right now. Again, we can definitely like get amped up with like Redux Thunk and eventually kind of move all of this out of our React components. And it's instead we just do a dispatch that's we kind of just do something like this, but this function, this dispatch actually does all this asynchronicity for us. But again, that's for like if you feel very comfortable doing these asynchronous calls in React and you'd like to kind of step further, you do it. I encourage you to do so, and give a look at the Thunk middleware and the apply middleware tool that Redux gives us. Anyway, that's kind of like the very long, kind of drawn out kind of explanation to Alex's question. So, I mean, how do you? I'm going to stop. Wait, can I? I can't see everybody. How do I see everyone? Let's see. I think I have to stop sharing my screen, perhaps. Bummer. Yeah, I'm going to do that anyway. Cool. Any questions about dealing with promises or asynchronicity in React and in our React Redux kind of setup?
So yeah, that's cool. It makes sense. I guess my question is it a bad idea then to do like asynchronous stuff in the action creator function instead?
No, you can do that. That sounds fine. That's all. I think that's all gravy. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't do that. Well, actually, I wouldn't do that. Because in your action creator, if you are like, you want that to return, well, as long as you waited for, well, no, I wouldn't do that either. Like, I think your action creator wants to return a pure, it needs to be a pure function. So when we introduce this asynchronicity into it, there's other kind of side effects that are going to happen. This is kind of like, this might fall under an opinion, Alex, especially since, if you're going to do that, I think you should make the jump to thunks anyway, because that's kind of what thunks are. There's kind of just like functions that return functions. They're functions that return asynchronous functions. And then we kind of go through this functional programming kind of chain of like dealing with asynchronicity. So I think I would probably keep them out of the object creators or the action creators. And that's what I would do. I thought that might be an opinion I have as opposed to kind of like a main practice, but I feel like that practice is not as things not happen so much because people use thunks in that to take care of that. But give it a whirl. If you see any kind of weird behavior, I would just move them out of the action creators in general and keep them in the React components.
Just to add to that, usually we just want to keep everything separated so that, for example, your action creator can be used non-asynchronously as well if you needed to. Like if you need to update something without fetching it from the database, for example, right? So we just want to keep everything separate so we have more utility in a sense.
Yes, I see Jessica Alba has joined us, and yes, we've talked about the thunk. Redux Promise middleware we did not talk about. There's a lot of other middlewares that happen that can be used in that thunk middleware that we talked about. Redux middleware. And applying many middlewares. You can apply whatever you'd like, and just remember that it happens in that specific order. That can lead to some interesting logging. That's all. Your logging can be interesting depending on the order you put those middlewares in. Cool. Jessica Alba, if you have any points about perhaps asynchronicity and action creators that are not thunks, happy to hear the thoughts. All right. Cool.
Thanks. Yeah, for what it's worth, I tried like doing some asynchronous stuff in action creators using the React Redux framework, and I actually ran into like weird bugs with like promises being returned and stuff. So
Yeah, React Redux can be a little bit strange, especially when you're mapping dispatch. Sometimes, especially with some shortcut kind of syntax, some things can get lost in the fray if you're not careful. And also like needing to, depending on if you're using async await or if you're using promises, you need to make sure that you're returning promises at almost every opportunity. If you're making like an Axios call or you're using a fetch call, you need to make sure you return that in the function that you're using to create that asynchronicity or to make that call. Just be sure if you're running into those errors, be sure you return your promises in the function somewhere. Let's see if we have any other. Cool. You can probably send that over. We probably we might not give too many comments on it, but sure, yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. It'll just help in my understanding that I'm thinking it the right way. There's a lot of thinking involved in this whole.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
So that is kind of all the questions we had. And I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of knew about these developer tools, both React Dev tools, and how we can set up a Redux logger to make sure that we know that helps in debugging, right? Because we need to see how the actions that we dispatch, how they affect state, and to make sure that state is getting to our components in the way we expect.
Ross, I just want to check, are you going to share this this folder you just worked on to us?
Sure, I can share this code.
Thanks.
I'll definitely share the video. I think the code, yeah, I mean, I'll make sure, I did this pretty quickly before we started, so I'll make sure that there's no weird stuff in there.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, and this will highlight specifically Redux Logger and apply middleware will kind of be the only things that are going to be different than perhaps your setup might be. Also want to, shout out Mark for that Webpack. The Webpack, that source map is super, super important for debugging. So if you do not understand what that source map thing's all about, Slack us and put it in your Webpack, because like Mark showed, like when you get errors on the front end, previously before we had these Webpack builds that didn't have the map in it, it was very difficult to figure out like where errors were happening in your React app, right? You might have seen a component where it was happening. It's like, oh, like this component's happening. There's an error here maybe. And so with this source map, it's going to give you the line. It's going to be the line where it's happening. So you can really zero in on the bug and really like figure out what's actually going on in the app. So I think the main takeaways are like both that Webpack source map, make sure you've got it. If you don't know what that means, Slack us. Make sure your Babel's kind of set up. If you have any problems with initial setup, if things aren't parsing, if you've copied and pasted some code, like there's some things that happen with some carriage returns, other things that are going to get weird in JSON files. So I think it's super important to make sure your Webpack has the source map, your Babel RC is happening, and your build tools are okay. Like your scripts of like, you're running your server, maybe you're running a start dev to run your Webpack and then start your server. Maybe you're watching both those things. These things will really help speed up the annoying parts of developing. So just want to make sure everyone has those things together. And if you don't, get to us quick. And are there any other kind of questions that we've got? Anything at all? Shell, I see you're on now. We went over the middleware earlier. This session's being recorded, so it should be cool. So that stuff's on there. I'm not quite sure when you hopped on. When I'm sharing my screen, I can't really see everybody.
Yeah, I'll take a look at the video at a later time.
You said you had something to do with like a Webpack weirdness with app.use or something.
Right. So I think it had to do with I just wasn't using @use at first, and so when I was serving my HTML file, I was getting a error that I couldn't find the main.js. I was just like confused about that for a while, and then once I did the app.use, it started working, and I think I was here in time though for the explanation as to why that static path makes everything work. So I think I understand my confusion now.
Yeah. Lots of times when you see that, especially like you can even check out your network tab because chances are like your browser, it's making a couple requests, right? It's making a first request that's going to grab your index HTML file. Most likely, it's like the default. That's what your browser is going to look for. And then it's going to parse like line by line going down your code, down your HTML file. It's going to find that script. It's like, oh, we need to get a script. And if you have a source tag, right, or a source property on that script tag, it's going to say, oh, we have a script here. Where are we going to go find this script? And it's going to go to that source and it's going to say, oh, like, where's this path to main or whatever, or main.js. And if you're not statically serving, or if your path is wrong, like you're dead in the water. Like your app's never going to start. The browser's never going to get your bundled React app, so you don't really have any place to go. So definitely like the static serving, and even like the path you're using in your index HTML file to get that script are super important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. There's other things in the chat that I'll probably put on the Slack from Jessica Alba, who has left the building. So yeah, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them. Like if you run into errors that you can't quite debug, I would ask them now. If you have some parsing errors, some Babel errors, those are tough ones. Jessica Alba's back. So just, right now is the time to ask questions, because if we don't have questions, we'll be all wrapped up. So if you have any questions, I know this is like the fourth time I've said it, and I've meant it each time. So, I mean, I feel like I'm a auctioneer. It's like going once, going twice kind of situation. Wow. What a joker. Jessica, everybody. Hi, Jessica. How you doing? Do you have any questions about Redux? No, you don't? Well, let's actually, yeah, I think.
This project is due Monday, right?
Due Monday, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thompson, you've missed Jessica out. She was here in the room for a second. I'm sad we didn't get to hear her thoughts on like dealing with asynchronicity and Redux. But maybe she'll be back. Maybe we'll hear her opinions. In that case, I don't know. I'm trying to juggle all of these different lines of communication. So we got this chat here, Slack here. If there's no other questions, that's all we got. So I guess have a great long weekend. Hope you get to relaxing at some point, and then working on this code at other points.
Is there any more help desk like until Monday, or this was it?
I'll be available as needed tomorrow. So if you need help, just Slack me. We can set up a time. Other than that, I think everyone's got plans.
Are you going to be at Whole Foods on Sunday?
It's a good question. Probably. I'll say yes for now. If I'm not going, then I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and given the holiday, I could I'll be on Slack possibly. Send me a Slack. I might be able to get back to you. I might not.
He's gonna be on Seattle time, so you can Slack him really late at night.
Well, I don't change hours. I just go to sleep very early in Seattle. That's just what I do. So if anybody wants some Seattle goods, I don't know what that would be.
Bring me back some Starbucks.
I hear they have really good Starbucks in Seattle. I'll try to keep it hot.
Bring me back some teriyaki.
For real.
Salmon. Some salted salmon.
The hell is salted salmon?
You never, Mark. You never had this?
I'm glad. I'm glad. Thompson. I'm glad we had that recorded. I'm glad that's here. So.
All right, guys. Have a good Thanksgiving.
I'm bad at goodbyes, I guess. I'm so bad at goodbyes. Cool. Good luck. Give it a good think. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks, guys.